and abide by our community guidelines. Alright. Okay, today we're going to be reading a book, and the book is Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Nietzsche. Alright, it's got a little bit. I don't have the front cover. The front cover used to be of Nietzsche with his moustache, like the print, the classic Nietzsche print of his face. Anyway, Friedrich Nietzsche was born near Leipzig in 1844, the son of a Lutheran clergyman. He attended the famous Pforta school, then went to university in Bonn and at Leipzig, where he studied philology and read Schopenhauer. When he was only 24, he was appointed to the chair of classical philology at Basel University. He stayed there until his health forced him into retirement in 1879. While at Basel, he made and broke his friendship with Wagner, participated as an ambulance orderly in the Franco-Prussian War, and published The Birth of Tragedy, 1872, Untimely Meditations, 1873-6, and the first two parts of Human, All Too Human, 1879-9. From 1880 until his final collapse in 1889, except for brief interludes, he divorced himself from everyday life and, supported by his university pension, he lived mainly in France, Italy, and Switzerland. The third part of Human, All Too Human, appeared in 1880, followed by the Dawn in 1881. Thus Spoke Zarathustra was written between 1883 and 1885, and his last completed books were Ecce Homo, an autobiography, and Nietzsche contra Wagner. He became insane in 1889 and remained in this condition of mental and physical paralysis until his death in 1900. R.J. Hollingdale was born in London in 1930. Until recently, he edited a magazine in Amsterdam and is now working on The Guardian. Among his many translations are two books by Nietzsche, done in collaboration with Walter Kaufmann in Princeton University. He is also the author of Nietzsche, the Man and His Philosophy, published in 1965. His translation in one volume of Nietzsche's Twilight of the Idols and the Antichrist was published in the Penguin Classics in 1968. Alright, here we go. Alright, introduction or skip the introduction? Anyone care? No. Alright, we're doing that then. Introduction. The first thing the reader of Thus Spoke Zarathustra will notice, even before he or she notices what is being said, is the manner of saying it, or rather, the excess of manner. The book's worst fault is excess. That is the most forgivable of its faults, doesn't change the fact that it is a fault. As it happens, excess is the one fault no one could impute to Nietzsche's subsequent works. Their concision, brevity, directness of statement are present to a degree not even approximated by any other German philosopher, and hardly equalled by any writer of any kind. It is clear that the oratorical, is something Nietzsche was impelled to give way to, and thus got rid of in Zarathustra. The eruption of words, metaphors, figures, and wordplay suggests an eruption of feeling. It will be our job here to try to discover why this eruption became necessary and why just at this time, i.e. January 1883, and thus to understand better what this great odd book is really about. Thus Spoke Zarathustra is, to anticipate our conclusions somewhat, the resolution of a long-sustained intellectual crisis. Let the word intellectual not mislead. Unlike most people, even most philosophers, Nietzsche lived with his intellectual problems as with realities. He experienced a similar emotional commitment to them as other men experience to their wife and children. It is this, indeed, which is the badge of his uniqueness and the key to understanding him. He makes clear what he means by intellectual problems in these few posthumously published notes. As soon as you feel yourself against me, you have ceased to understand my position and consequently my arguments. You have to be the victim of the same passion. Alright? Okay. I want to awaken the greatest mistrust of myself. I speak only of things I have experienced and do not offer only events in the head. One must want to experience the great problems with one's body and one's soul. I have at all times written my writings with my whole heart and soul. I do not know what purely intellectual problems are. You know, these things as thoughts, but your thoughts are not your experiences. They are an echo, an after effect of your experiences. As when your room trembles when a carriage goes past, I, however, am sitting in the carriage, and often I am the carriage itself. In a man who thinks like this, the dichotomy between thinking and feeling, intellect and passion, has really disappeared. He feels his thoughts, he can fall in love with an idea can make him ill. His forebears were Lutherans. Many were in the Lutheran church. His father and both grandfathers were Lutheran ministers, and his paternal grandfather was a superintendent, the Lutheran equivalent of a bishop. As a boy, he was, as befitted a pastor's son, intensely pious, but he lost his faith during his late teens and abandoned the study of theology. He replaced religious belief with freelance philosophizing, upon which he brought to bear the intensity of involvement he had withdrawn from religion. The path away from the family parsonage was the path of skepticism. Schopenhauerian metaphysics and Wagnerian music were detours. Ersatz religion. In the summer of 1876, in his 32nd year, he returned to the skeptical path and started on a series of aphoristic books which constitute probably the most thorough course in skepticism produced in the 19th century. Human, All Too Human appeared in 1878. Assorted Opinions and Maxims in 1879. The Wanderer and His Shadow in 1880. In June 1881, he published Dawn. These books embody reflections on a very wide range of subjects, but the controlling tendency of his thought during all these 5 years is nonetheless unmistakable. It is to break down all the concepts and qualities in which mankind takes pride and pleasure into a few simple qualities in which no one takes pride or pleasure, and to see in the latter the origin of the former. Likewise, to undermine morality by exposing its non-moral basis and rationality by exposing its irrational basis. Likewise, to abolish the higher world, the metaphysical, by accounting for all its supposed manifestations in terms of the human phenomenon and even animal world. In brief, the controlling tendency of his thought is nihilist. The cheerful tone, the stylistic beauty, the coolness of the performance cannot conceal that what is taking place is destruction. The fact was, in any event, obvious to Nietzsche himself, and of all the problems, this became the greatest, the most pressing, the one with which his passion was most engaged. He had come close to a total devaluation of humanity, and because he could as yet see no way of halting this movement, he took the only course open to him. He pushed it to its limit. The earlier parts of his next book, The Gay Science, were intended for Dawn. They were excluded partly because he thought that book had grown sufficiently bulky, but also, I would say, because of the enhanced vehemence of what he was now thinking and writing. The nihilism of his position is now stated frankly. The four errors. Man has been reared by his errors. First, he never saw himself other than imperfectly. Second, he attributed to himself imaginary qualities. Third, he felt himself in a false order of rank with animal and nature. Fourth, he continually invented new tables of values and for a time took each of them to be eternal and unconditional, so that now this, now that human drive and state took first place and was, as a consequence of this evaluation, ennobled. If one deducts the effect of these four errors, one has deducted away humanity, humanness, and human dignity. He looks more squarely in the face and discusses more urgently the question whether truth is in any way discoverable or whether mankind is not necessitated to error. Life, no argument. We have arranged for ourselves a world in which we are able to live, with the postulation of bodies, lines, surfaces, causes and effects, motion and rest, form and content. Without these articles of faith, nobody could now endure to live, but that does not mean that they are something proved and demonstrated. Life is no argument. Among the conditions of life could be error. He reaches what seems to be the final term in this line of argument, ultimate skepticism. What then is the last resort? What then in the last resort are the truths of mankind? They are the irrefutable errors of mankind. His conception of the world as meaningless and chaotic is rounded off. That God is dead is announced in a famous passage, the madman. Have you not heard of the madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace and cried incessantly, "I am looking for God! I am looking for God!" As many of those who did not believe in God were standing together there, he excited considerable laughter. "Have you lost him, then?" said one. "Did he lose his way like a child?" said another. "Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage or emigrated?" Thus they shouted and laughed. This madman sprang into their midst and pierced them with his glances. "Where has God gone?" he cried. "I shall tell you. We have killed him, you and I. We are all murderers. But how have we done this? How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do with when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns? Are we not perpetually falling? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there any up or down, left? Are we not straying as though an infinite nothing? Do we not feel and breathe of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is more and more night not coming on all the time? Must not lanterns be lit in the morning? Do we not hear anything yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we not smell anything yet of God's decomposition? God's too decomposed. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we, the murderers of all murderers, console ourselves? That which was holiest and mightiest of all, that the world has yet possessed, has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? With what water could we purify ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we need to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must not we ourselves become gods simply to seem worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever shall be born after us for the sake of this deed, he shall be part of a higher history than all history hitherto. Not only is there no God, there is no other ordering principle either. Let us beware! Let us be aware of thinking the world is a living being. Whither should it spread itself? What should it nourish itself with? How could it grow and multiply? We know indeed more or less what the organic is, and shall we reinterpret the unspeakably derivative, late, rare, chance phenomena which we perceive only on the surface of the earth into the essential, universal, eternal, as they do who call the universe an organism? I find that disgusting. Let us likewise beware of believing the universe is a machine. It is certainly not constructed so as to perform some operation. We do it far too great honor with the word machine. Let us beware of presupposing that something so orderly as the cyclical motions of our planetary neighbors are the general and universal case. Even a glance at the Milky Way gives rise to doubt whether there may not exist far more crude and contradictory motions. Likewise, stars with eternally straight trajectories and the like. The astral order in which we live is an exception. This order and the apparent permanence which is conditional upon it is in its turn made possible by the exception of exceptions, the formation of the organic. The total nature of the world is, on the other hand, to all eternity chaos. Not in the sense that necessity is lacking, but in that order, structure, form, beauty, wisdom, and whatever other human aesthetic notions we may have are lacking. Judged from the viewpoint of our reason, the unsuccessful cases are far and away the rule. The exceptions are not the secret objective, and the whole contraption repeats this theme, which can never be called a melody over and over again to eternity, but ultimately even the term unsuccessful case is already a humanization which contains a reproof. But how? Can we venture to reprove or praise the universe? Let us beware of attributing to it heartlessness and unreason or their opposites. It is neither perfect nor beautiful nor noble, and has no desire to become any of these. It is by no means striving to imitate mankind. It is quite impervious to all our aesthetic and moral judgments. It has likewise no impulse to self-preservation or impulses of any kind. Neither does it know any laws. Let us beware of saying there are laws in nature. There are only necessities. There is no one to command, no one to obey, no one to transgress. Let us beware of saying that death is the opposite of life. The living being is only a species of the dead, and a very rare species. These passages, and very many more like them, are included in the first 3 of the 4 books which constitute the original edition of the Gay Science. They seem to me to mark the end of the road on which Nietzsche set out when he left his forefathers' faith and went off alone. I do not see how he or anyone could go further in his direction. If he had not found some other direction, he would at this time, the second half of 1881, have reached his end station, and it is his knowledge that this is so that constitutes the intellectual crisis of which Zarathustra is the resolution. We must now take a look at another aspect of Nietzsche's authorship. So far as modern Europe is concerned, he was very much a pioneer in the demolition of ancient habits of mind and moral prejudices, and he was moreover very little read during his active life, so that to a great degree he had to be his own commentator and critic. There is an element in his work which derives directly from this fact. You will often hear not one voice but 2. One asserts, the other objects and qualifies, or one draws a somber, the other a happy conclusion from the same premises. Now, one important duty of the second voice is to intimate strategic points in the book, that all the demolition going on may be only the essential preliminary and prerequisite for new construction, and none of these passages is more eloquent or revealing than that which stands at the end of dawn. We astronauts of the spirit, all those brave birds which fly out into the farthest distance, it is certain somewhere or other they will be unable to go on and will perch down on a mast or a bare cliff face, and they will even be thankful for this miserable accommodation. But who could venture to infer from that there was not an immense open space before them, that they had flown as far as one could fly? All our great teachers and predecessors have at last come to a stop. It will be the same with you and me, but what does that matter to you and me? Other birds will fly higher. This insight and faith of ours vies with them in flying up and away. It rises above our heads and above our impotence into the heights, and from there surveys the distance and sees before it the flocks of birds which, far stronger than we, still strive whither we have striven, and where everything is sea, sea, sea. And whither then would we go? Would we cross the sea? Whither does this mighty longing draw us? This longing that is worth more to us than any pleasure. Why just in this direction? Thither, where all the sons of humanity have hitherto gone down. Will it perhaps be said of us one day that we too, steering westward, hope to reach an India, but that it was our fate to be wrecked against infinity? Oh, my brothers, oh! This makes a brave sound, and the feeling that expresses that there are new worlds to be opened up came to dominate more and more from the summer of 1881 onwards. Ideas have arisen on my horizon, the like of which I have never seen before, Nietzsche wrote to Peter Gast on 14th of August 1881. I shall certainly have to live a few years more. The intensity of my feeling makes me shudder and laugh. A couple of times I couldn't leave my room for the ludicrous reason that my eyes were inflamed. Each time I had been weeping so much on my walks the day before, not sentimental tears, but tears of rejoicing. And as I wept I sang and talked nonsense, filled with a new vision. This is not an altogether new note, but the intensity is new, and the ideas alluded to are also new, and new in this sense that they are direct attempts to go beyond the nihilist conclusions of the past 5 years without being obliged to retract any of them. The 4th book of the Gay Science is a signpost pointing the way Nietzsche is going, always under the influence of significant dates. He opens it with a passage written on New Year's Day 1882. For the new year I am still living, I am still thinking, I have to go on living because I have to go on thinking. Sum ergo cogito ergo sum. Today everyone is permitted to express his desire and dearest thoughts, so I too would like to say what I have desired of myself today, and what thought was the first to cross my heart this year. What thought shall be the basis, guarantee, and sweetness of all my future life? I want to learn more and more to see what is necessary in things as the beautiful in them. Thus I shall become one of those who make things beautiful. Amor fati. May that be my love from now on. I want to wage no war against the ugly. I do not want to accuse. I do not want even to accuse the accusers. May looking away be my only form of negation. And all in all, I want to be at all times hereafter only an affirmer. Ein Yag Saginda. This challenge to everything nihilist in his nature is followed a little later by a call to action, battle, and positive commitment phrased in one of his most famous coinages, perhaps actually the most famous phrase in all of his works. I greet all the signs that a more manly, warlike age is coming, which will, above all, bring valor again into honor, for it has to prepare the way for yet a higher age, and assemble the force which that age will one day have need of, that age which will carry heroism and knowledge and wage war for the sake of ideas and their consequences. To that end, many brave pioneers are needed now, men who know not to be silent, solitary, resolute, who have an innate disposition to seek in all things that which must be overcome in them, men to whom cheerfulness, patience, simplicity, and contempt for the great vanities belong just as much as do generosity in victory and indulgence toward the little vanities of the defeated. Men with their own festivals, their own work days, their own days of mourning, accustomed to and assured in command, and equally ready to obey when necessary, equally proud in one case as in the other, equally serving their own cause. Men more imperiled, men more fruitful, happier men. For believe me, the secret of realizing the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment of existence is to live dangerously. Build your cities on the slopes of Vesuvius. Send your ships out into uncharted seas. Live in conflict with your equals and with yourselves. Be robbers and ravagers as long as you cannot be rulers and owners, you men of knowledge. A new image of man, of what mankind might be, begins to appear. Excelsior! You will never again pray, never again worship, never again repose in limitless trust. You deny it to yourself to remain halted before an ultimate wisdom, ultimate good, ultimate power, and there unharness your thoughts. You have no perpetual guardian and friend for your seven solitudes. There is no longer for you any rewarder and recompenser, no final corrector. No final corrector. There is no longer any reason in what happens, no longer any love in what happens to you. There is no longer any resting place open to your heart where it has only to find and no longer to seek. You resist any kind of ultimate peace. You want the eternal recurrence of war and peace. Man of renunciation, will you renounce in all of this? Who will give you the strength for it? No one has yet possessed this strength. There is a lake which one day denied it to itself to flow away and threw up a dam at the place where it formerly flowed away. Since then, this lake has risen higher and higher. Perhaps it is precisely that renunciation which will also lend to the strength by which the renunciation itself can be endured. Perhaps man will rise higher and higher from that time when he no longer flows out into a god. And the penultimate section of the book is a very curious suggestion of a formula of self and life affirmation. The heaviest burden. What if a demon crept after you one day or night in your loneliest solitude and said to you, this life, as you live it now and have lived it, you will have to live again and again, times without number, and there will be nothing new in it. But every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and all the unspeakably small and great in your life must return to you, and everything in the same series and sequence, and in the same way this spider and this moonlight among the trees, and in the same way this moment and I myself, the eternal hourglass of existence, will be turned again and again, and you with it, you dust of dust, Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who thus spoke? Or have you experienced a tremendous moment in which you would have answered him, "You are a god, and never did I ever hear anything more divine"? If this thought gained power over you, it would, as you are now, transform and perhaps crush you. The question in all and everything, do you want this again and again, times without number? Would lie as the heaviest burden upon your actions? Or how well disposed towards yourself and towards life would you have to become to have no greater desire than for this ultimate eternal sanction and seal? In April 1882 began the one wholly serious sexual involvement of Nietzsche's life, his brief and humiliating affair with Lou Salome. This is not the place to go into the details of that affair. I discuss it here at all only because it has some bearing on the man in solitude aspect of Zarathustra, and because it is part of the general state of crisis in which Nietzsche existed during the 18 months from the summer of 1881 to the beginning of 1883. Only 2 points need to be made. Firstly, Nietzsche thought that the solitude in which he had been living since he enforced retirement from Basel University at Easter 1879, and which had been weighing more and more heavily upon him, was about to come to an end. In a letter to Lou Salome, 2nd of June 1882, he says that the previous day it seemed as if it must be my birthday. You sent me your assent, i.e. to come and stay with him for 3 weeks. The best present anyone could have given me. Tabner printer sent the first 3 proof sheets of the Gay Science, and in addition to all this, the last part of the manuscript of the Gay Science was completed, and therewith the work of 6 years, 1876 to 1882, my entire free thought. This means that when he wrote this letter, he had just made a fair copy of the following passage, which closes the Gay Science in its original version. Incipit Tragodia. When Zarathustra was 30 years old, he left his home in Lake Ermi and went into the mountains, where here he had the enjoyment of his spirit and his solitude, and he did not weary of it for 10 years. But at last his heart turned, and one morning he rose with the dawn, stepped before the sun, and spoke to it thus: "Great star, what would your happiness be if you had not those for whom you shine? You have come up here to my cave for 10 years. You would have grown weary of your light and of this journey without me, my eagle, and my serpent. But we waited for you every morning, took from you your superfluity, and blessed you for it. Behold, I am weary of my wisdom. Like a bee that has gathered too much honey, I need hands outstretched to take it. I should like to give it away and distribute it, until the wise among men have again become happy in their folly, and the poor happy in their wealth. To that end I must descend into the depths, as you do at evening when you go behind the sea, and bring bright light to the underworld too. Superabundant star, like you, I must go down, as men to whom I want to descend call it. So bless me, then, tranquil eye, that can behold without envy even an excessive happiness. Bless the cup that wants to overflow, that the waters may flow golden from him, and bear the reflection of your joy over all the world. Behold, this cup wants to be empty again, and Zarathustra wants to be made again. Thus began Zarathustra's going down. The sense of this passage is repeated in other words at the end of the above quoted letter. I don't want to be lonely anymore. I want to learn to be human again. Alas, in this field I have almost everything still to learn. Undoubtedly, Nietzsche at this point identified himself with another teacher who came down out of solitude around his 40th year. The second point is that after he was abandoned during the following October by Lou Salome and had to realize that his hope of marrying her was definitely not going to be fulfilled, he fell into an abyss of despair. I am not underrating the emotional effect which such a disappointment might normally be expected to produce, but its effect on Nietzsche was certainly very violent indeed, especially considering that his disposition was usually a cheerful one. It should be recalled that he had been recurrently ill since 1871, almost certainly a consequence of a syphilitic infection contracted when a student, and the inability of these attacks to depress him or do more than delay his work is a witness to the resilience of his temperament. His failure with Lou, however, threw him for a time completely off balance. How far off balance can be gauged, for example, from this letter to Franz Overbeck, posted on Christmas Day, 1882. I have suffered from the disgraceful and anguished recollections of this past summer as from a kind of madness. They involve a conflict of contrary emotions which I am not equal to. If only I could sleep, but the strongest sleeping draughts of help as Step 5. Practice and we're just in the middle of talking about how Nietzsche was a bit of a fucking loser. Okay? Alright. I have suffered from the disgraceful and anguishing recollections of my past summer as from a kind of madness. They involve a conflict of contrary emotions which I am not equal to. If only I could sleep, but the strongest sleeping draughts help as little as do the 6 to 8 hour walks I take. If I cannot find the magic formula to turn all this muck into gold, I am lost. I now mistrust everybody. I sense in everything I hear contempt towards me. Sometimes I think of renting a small room in Basel, visiting you now and then and attending lectures. Sometimes I think of doing the opposite, of driving my solitude and resignation to the ultimate limit, and the ground of this violent reaction was, as other letters, but especially Zarathustra, show, the realization he was back in solitude and that he was going to stay there. With the benefit of hindsight, we can see that by the turn of the year 1882 to 83, there had been assembled in Nietzsche the material for an explosion of some sort, or rather, as we shall discover, an eruption. Intellectually, emotionally, and physically, he was all but exhausted, but the ideas of the summer of 1881, as they had received tentative expression in the 4th book of the Gay Science, are preliminary rumblings which indicate what is coming. In January, as a result of 10 absolutely fresh and cheerful January days, the tension broke, inhibition gave way, and the first part of Zarathustra came furiously out. Has anyone at the end of the 19th century a distinct conception of what poets of strong ages call inspiration? He asked in Ecce Homo, apropos of Zarathustra. If not, I will describe it. If one had the slightest residue of superstition left in one would hardly be able to set aside the idea that one is merely incarnation, merely mouthpiece, merely medium of overwhelming forces. The concept of revelation in this sense has that something suddenly, with unspeakable certainty and subtlety, becomes visible, audible, something that shakes and overturns one to the depths, simply describes the fact: one hears, one does not seek, one takes, one does not ask who gives. A thought flashes up like lightning, with necessity unfalteringly formed. I have never had any choice. An ecstasy whose tremendous tension sometimes discharges. Wait a second. If not, I will describe. If not, I will describe it. If one had the slightest residue of superstition left in one would hardly be able to set aside the idea that one is merely incarnation, merely mouthpiece, merely medium of the overwhelming forces. The concept of revelation in this sense, that something suddenly, with unspeakable certainty and subtlety, becomes visible, audible, something that shakes and overturns one to the depths, simply describes the fact: one hears, one does not seek, one takes, one does not ask who gives. A thought flashes up like lightning, with necessity unfalteringly formed. I have never had any choice. An ecstasy whose tremendous tension sometimes discharges itself in a flood of tears, while one's steps now involuntarily rush along, now involuntarily lag. A depth of happiness in which the most painful and gloomy things appear, not as an antithesis, but as condition demanded, as a necessary color within such a superfluity of light. Everything is in the highest degree involuntary and takes place as in a tempest of feeling of freedom, of absoluteness of power, of divinity. The involuntary nature of image, of metaphor, is the most remarkable thing of all. One no longer has any idea what is image, what metaphor. Everything presents itself as the readiest, the truest, the simplest means of expression. It really does seem to allude to an expression of Zarathustra's, as if the things themselves approached and offered themselves as metaphors. This is my experience of inspiration. I do not doubt that one has to go back thousands of years to find anyone who could say to me, "It is mine also." Zarathustra again emerges from this 10-year solitude, but now the mankind to whom he wants to address himself rejects him, and he turns from it. Subsequently, he deserts even the chosen few who have remained with him and goes back into solitude. His message to mankind is, "I teach you the Superman." Man is something that should be overcome, and the Superman is the meaning of the earth. Let your will say the Superman shall be the meaning of the earth, and all gods are dead. Now we want the Superman to live. Let this be our last will one day at the great noontide. Then a table of values hangs over every people. Behold, it is the table of its overcomings. Behold, it is the voice of its will to power. And the second part, written in a similar state of excitement in the following June and July, of self-overcoming. Where I found a living creature, there I found the will to power. And life itself told me this secret. Behold, it said, I am that which must overcome itself again and again. Where there is perishing and the falling of leaves, behold, there life sacrifices itself, and for the sake of power. And you, too, enlightened man, are only a path and footstep of my will. Truly, my will to power walks with the feet of your will to truth. The living creature values many things higher than life itself, yet out of this evaluation itself speaks the will to power. And in the third part, written in the state of even greater excitement in January 1884, oh, my will, preserve me from all petty victories, that I may one day be ready and ripe in the great noontide, a bow, eager for its arrow, an arrow, eager for its star, a star, ready and ripe in its noontide, glowing, transpierced. Spare me for one great victory, and sing and bubble over, O Zarathustra, heal your soul with new songs, so that you may bear your great destiny. Behold, you are the teacher of the eternal recurrence, and if you should die now, O Zarathustra, behold, we know too what you would then say to yourself. Now I die and decay, and in an instant I shall be nothingness. But the complex of causes in which I am entangled will recur. It will create me again. I shall return, not to a new life or a better life or a similar life. I shall return eternally to this identical and same life, to teach once more the eternal recurrence of all things, to speak once more the teaching of the great noontide of earth and man, to tell man of the Superman once more. Finally, O man, attend. What does deep midnight's voice contend? O slept my sleep, and now awake at dreaming's end. The world is deep, deeper than day can comprehend. Deep is its woe, joy, deeper than heart's agony. Woe says, fade, go, but all joy wants eternity, wants deep, deep, deep eternity. And in an immense expansion of this poem, written a year later, did you ever say yes to one joy? Oh, my friends, then you said yes to all woe as well. All things are chained and entwined together. All things are in love. If you ever wanted one moment twice, if you ever said, you please me, happiness, instant, moment, then you wanted everything to return. You wanted everything in you, everything eternal, everything chained, entwined together, everything in love. Oh, that is how you loved the world. You everlasting men loved it eternally and for all time. And you say, even to woe, go but return. For all joy wants eternity. The Superman, the will to the Superman, the will to power and self-overcoming. Live dangerously, amor fati. Eternal recurrence, total affirmation of life, the great noontide. These are the slogans, the signs by which Nietzsche surmounted his nihilism and resolved his crisis. Let's now try to the heart of this book and discover the real meaning of its central concepts. What is truth? Said jesting Pilate, and would not stay for an answer. If he had stayed, what answers would he have received? There cannot be any doubts. Jesus would have said, I am the truth. This too is Zarathustra's answer to the question, what is truth? For what is this level of what at this level is truth? The truth isn't it the discovery that no truth is discoverable except the truth which you yourself are, that there is no truth, sense, meaning in the world except the truth, sense, meaning you yourself give it. The truth is a concept belonging to the human mind and will, and that apart from the human mind and will, there is no such thing as truth. Finally, that the resolute determination that your own truth shall be the truth is the sole origin of the truth on earth. To give life a meaning that has been the grand endeavor of all who have preached truth. For unless life is given a meaning, it has none. At this level, truth is not something that can be proved or disproved. It is something which you determine upon, which, in the language of the old psychology, you will. It is not something waiting to be discovered, something to which you submit or at which you halt. It is something you create. It is the expression of a particular kind of life and being which has, in you, ventured to assert itself. Thus Zarathustra declares, the Superman is the meaning of the earth. Let your will say, the Superman shall be the meaning of the earth. He is the prophet, not the truth that is, but the truth that shall be. What determines the nature of the truth? The nature of the truth of the nature of the I which asserts I am the truth. Why truth and not rather untruth or indifference to truth? Because each particular life and being needs a fortress within which to preserve and protect itself, and from which to reach out to in search of aggrandizement and more power, and truth is this fortress. Or, as life says to thinking mankind, my will to power walks with the feet of your will to truth. What then ultimately is the answer to Pilate's question? It is, truth is will to power. Thus, by my reading at any rate, spoke Zarathustra. The great need, the one thing needful, was to overcome the nihilistic devaluation of life and man which had followed the destruction of all the metaphysical world, the death of God. This devaluation had been effected chiefly by a psychological theory, namely the theory that primitive drives can be sublimated so that distinctively humane qualities can be understood as sublimated forms of drives which mankind has in common with the animals. The motive for formulating such a theory was the need to account for what is distinctively human without recourse to the metaphysical or supernatural. From a very large number of experiments, two primitive drives emerged as dominant: the desire for power and the emotion of fear. And when Nietzsche came to understand fear as the feeling of the absence of power, he was left with a single motivating principle for all human actions: the will to power. Sublimated will to power was now the Ariadne's thread tracing the way out of the labyrinth of nihilism. A table of values, i.e. morality, hangs over every people. It is the table of the self-imposed commands which have turned a herd and rabble into a nation, primitive, aggressive, and being directed back upon itself, sublimated into self-control. When the same thing happens in an individual, when he imposes commands upon himself and obeys them, so that he too, as it were, changes from a rabble into a nation. This results the Superman, the man who is master of himself, but to master oneself is the hardest of all tasks, which will require the greatest amount of power. He who can do it has experienced the greatest increase in power. And if, as Nietzsche later says explicitly, but here implies happiness. In Zarathustra, joy is the feeling that power. Okay. Nietzsche later says implicitly, but here implies happiness. In Zarathustra, joy is the feeling that power increases, that a resistance is overcome, then Superman will be the happiest man, and as such the meaning and justification of existence, through continual increase of power to transmute the chaos of life into continual self-overcoming of life, and thus to experience in an ever greater degree the joy which is synonymous with this self-overcoming. That would now be the meaning of life, for joy is to Nietzsche, as it is to common sense, the the one thing that requires no justification, that it is its own justification. He who had attained that joy would affirm life and love it, however much pain it contained, because he would know that all things are chained and entwined together, and that everything is therefore part of a whole which he must accept as a whole. To express this feeling of life affirmation, Nietzsche formulated a theorem of the eternal recurrence of the same events, to which he gave rhapsodic expression in Zarathustra. To be sure, only the Superman could be so well disposed towards his life as to want it again and again forever. But that precisely is the reason for willing his creation. The joy of the Superman in being as he is now and ever is the ultimate sublimation of the will to power and the final overcoming of an otherwise inexorable and inevitable nihilism. These conceptions constitute the heart of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. These and the extended hymn to solitude and individuality to which the book owes its peculiar tone and pathos. I have described the process of their formation as an eruption, but what I mean is an eruption from the subconscious of ideas belonging to Nietzsche's earliest years. An eruption brought about by the fact that at this time he had arrived at the end of the path which led away from them. He could go no further forward, so he had to go back. But since he likewise could not retract what he had been asserting, but since he could no longer retract what he had been asserting for the previous 5 years, these earliest ideas which now came up transformed and distorted, almost beyond recognition. What is involved is this operation of something like the psychic censor of psychoanalysis, so that I doubt whether Nietzsche himself was altogether aware of the provenance of the grand and grandiose positive conceptions to the elaboration of which he began to apply his exceptional rhetorical gifts. These earliest ideas are, of course, Christian, and specifically Lutheran. The teaching of Lutheran pietism is before all that the events of life are divinely willed, and that it is thus impiety to desire that things should be different from what they are. I owe this insight to Mr. Marvin Rintala, who, in his review of my biography of Nietzsche in the Review of Politics, January 1969, said I had failed to understand in what the essence of Lutheran pietism consisted, which was true, and then went on to expound it. The great petition of the Lord's Prayer, says Mr. Rintala, is for pietists. They will be done. This is so much in line with the Christian origin of the conceptions of Zarathustra that I ought to have guessed it, even if I did not know. All right. Okay, where was I? But the other tenets of Christian belief are naturally also firmly adhered to by the Lutherans. Here, without more ado, are what I take to be the Christian parallels to the conceptions which dominated Nietzsche's mind during the period from the summer of 1881 to the year January 1883, January 1884, when they found full expression in Zarathustra. Amor fati, the love of one's farts. Lutheran acceptance of the events of life as divinely willed, and with the consequent affirmation of life as such, as divine, as a product of the divine will, and the implication that to hate life is blasphemous. Eternal recurrence as a consequence of amor fati, the extremist formula of life affirmation strongly influenced by the Christian concepts of eternal life and the unalterable nature of God, which is now, and ever shall be, world without end, will to power, divine grace. The clue to connexion is the concept of self-overcoming, which is one of Nietzsche's terms for sublimation, and the hinge upon which the theory of the will to power turns from being a nihilist to a positive and joyful conception. The corresponding Christian conception is that of unregenerate nature redeemed by the force of God's grace. In both conceptions, the central idea is that a certain inequality, grace, sublimated will to power, elevates men, or some men, above the rest of nature. The pathos with which will to power is invested derives to some extent from thy will be done, and the juxtaposition of power and glory, together with the Christian doctrine that the God's will all things are possible. That to God's will all things are possible. Live dangerously, take up thy cross and follow me. Christian deprecation of the easy life, great noontide, the second coming, the last judgment, the division of the sheep from the goats, the wheat from the chaff, Superman, God as creator and highest being, the Son of Man as God, man as a receptacle of divine grace who rejoices at the idea of eternity, the embodiment of actualization of everything regarding the desirable, what the Christian says of God. Nietzsche says in very nearly the same words of the Superman, namely, thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Zarathustra's posture as inspired prophet and reader of riddles would itself suggest an atavism in Nietzsche's mind, even if we were unable clearly to identify the earlier stage to which it had reverted. But it was an atavism whose effect was curative, like an electrical storm that breaks up the cloud and bad weather which has caused it. The theme of joy in existence, of the self-sufficiency and joy of the sovereign individual, of this joyful self-sufficiency as the aim and meaning of life, is what finally reigns as the paramount theme of the book, and this theme derives not from the grand but ultimately overpowering and stifling conceptions of Christianity, but from someone Nietzsche was later to celebrate as an actualization of the Superman, Goethe. I think that's right. Goethe. What? Yeah, right. When the sound and wholesome nature of man acts as an entirety, when he feels himself in the world as a grand, beautiful, worthy, and worthwhile whole, when his harmonious comfort affords him a pure, untrammeled delight, then the universe, if it could be sensible of itself, would shout for joy at having attained its goal and wonder at the pinnacle of its own essence and evolution. For what ends is served by all the expenditure of suns and planets and moons, of stars and Milky Ways, of comets and nebula, of worlds evolving and passing away, if at last a happy man does not involuntarily rejoice in his existence. This passage from Goethe's essay on Winckelmann, which Nietzsche certainly knew could stand as the motto of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It is the distillation of the great benevolent spirit of Goethe, a spirit Nietzsche called Dionysian, and with which, for all its tremendous difference in emphasis, Zarathustra is in accordance. I now offer a brief survey of Zarathustra's chapter by chapter and comment on a few individual points about which the reader may like some enlightenment. Zarathustra, Greek Zoroastres, is the founder of the ancient Persian religion, and the book with which he is credited, the Zend Avesta, is its Bible. Scholars of the 19th century questioned whether Zarathustra existed, as they questioned whether Homer existed, probably a side effect of evolutionism. Both are now rehabilitated. Nietzsche protested at the dissolution of Homer. We gain nothing with our theory of the poeticizing soul of the people. We are always referred back to the poetical individual. Homer and Classical Philology, 1869, 7th century BC. The heart of his religion is a conflict between Ahura Mazda, Uramuzd, the god of light and good, and Angra Mainyu, Ahriman, the god of darkness and evil. Nietzsche's explanation of why he appropriated his name for his own hero. I have not been asked, as I should have been asked, what the name Zarathustra means in precisely my mouth, in the mouth of the first immoralist, for what constitutes the tremendous uniqueness of this Persian in history is precisely the opposite of this. Zarathustra was the first to see, in the struggle between good and evil, the actual wheel in the working of things, the translation of morality into the realm of metaphysics as force, cause, end in itself, in his work. But this question is itself, at bottom, its own answer. Zarathustra created this most fateful of errors, morality. Consequently, he must also be the first to recognize it. Not only has he had longer and greater experience here than any other thinker, what is more important is that Zarathustra is more truthful than any other thinker. His teaching, and his alone, upholds truthfulness as the supreme virtue. To tell the truth and to shoot well with arrows, that is Persian virtue. Have I been understood? The self-overcoming of morality through truthfulness, the self-overcoming of the moralist into his opposite, into me. That is what the name Zarathustra means in my mouth, Ecce Homo. The book is very loosely constructed, but it does possess direction and a plot of sorts. Part 1, Prologue. Zarathustra comes down out of the solitude, announces. 2, that God is dead. And 3, preaches God's successor, the Superman. Mankind fails to understand him, even when he 4, expounds his beatitudes. Matthew 5:3-11, and 5 appeals to their pride by describing the Superman's antithesis, the ultimate man, the man who sacrifices the future to his own present. The 6 overtoppling of the tightrope walker. Mankind balances over an abyss by the buffoon. Zarathustra himself, perhaps an unannounced attraction, brings home to Zarathustra 7 that human existence is uncanny. Cf. the second chorus of the Antigone. Many things are uncanny, but none more uncanny than man. And after a bad night, 8, he resolves 9 to desert the marketplace and speak his message only to the individual. The 22 discourses which follow are addressed by Zarathustra to his band of disciples. 5 of the discourses are enclosed in a miniature dramatic scene. The remainder are direct addresses. Each is an epitome of Nietzsche's views on the subject in question. Oh, the education of the spirit, self-discipline, independence, creativity, for another account in quite different language. See Human, All Too Human, preface to Volume 1, 1886, sections 3-7. Negative virtue, virtue which consists in not doing wrong, which has its reward peace of soul, the metaphysical world, including renunciation of his earlier view, The Birth of Tragedy, 1872, that aesthetic values are the only true values. 4. The relation between mind and body, a prologue to the theory of will to power. 5. The nature of virtue. 6. Its opposite, the criminal instinct. 7. Aphorisms on authorship, happiness and laughter, introduces the spirit of gravity. 8. Nobility of soul. 9. Pessimisms. 10. Live dangerously. 11. The state. 12. Nausea at mankind. L'enfer. C'est l'auteur. 13. Sensuality and its disguises. 14. How to be a true friend. 15. The relativity of moral values, introduces the will to power. 16. Critique of love thy neighbor as thyself. 17. The need for solitude and the danger of solitude. 18. The nature of women. 19. The nature of justice. 20. Bad marriages and good ones. 21. Bad deaths and good ones. Overall, the discourses hovers Zarathustra's dictum, man is something that must be overcome. The final chapter reverts to the prologue, to the death of God, and the need for the Superman to give significance to the earth. Zarathustra extols the magnanimous man, the man so full of strength and well-being he bestows gifts on others because he has to, and exhorts his disciples to independence. Then he leaves them. Part 2. Much more various than Part 1, Zarathustra is more of a dramatic character, and 8 of the 22 chapters involve action. 1. Corresponds to the prologue of Part 1, Zarathustra's return. 2. A much expanded recapitulation of the God is dead theme and the introduction of the Superman as God's successor. 3. Pity for mankind and the need to overcome it. 4. Organized religion and the priesthood. 5. Another essay on virtue, true and false. 6. Another essay on nausea and mankind and how to avoid it. 7. Another essay on justice and a polemic against revengefulness disguised as justice. 8. Philosophy, true and false. 9-11. Prose poems, autobiographical for the most part, fretful, plaintive, disgruntled. Part 3, 3-4 and 4-16. 12. The will to power in full. 13. Resumes and completes 8-14. Critique of contemporary culture. 15. Critique of the contemplative life and the search for pure knowledge. 16. Critique of the scholarly life. 17. Critique of the artistic nature. 18. Dramatically, the book's turning point. A discourse on revolution and anarchism is allied to an uncommon amount of action and fantastical story told by sailors. Zarathustra's disciples hardly listen to his discourse, we are told, because of their anxiety to repeat the sailor's story, the point of which is that Zarathustra's alter ego has been seen flying through the air crying, "It is time. It is high time. For what it is time? For what is it time? For what is it high time?" Zarathustra asks himself when he learns this. The answer, suppressed for the moment, but henceforward never absent from his mind, is time to declare the eternal recurrence. 19. Continues the fantastical atmosphere of the 18 and intensifies into nightmare. Zarathustra is now in his nervous and depressed condition, very different from the state of ebullient optimism which which has chiefly characterized him hitherto, a dark night of the soul, which persists into part 320, a discourse on great men, leads to reflections on the nature of will in the midst of which Zarathustra is struck dumb when he realizes the implications of what he is saying for the theory of eternal recurrence. 21. On the desirability of masks, a beautifully shaped chapter, in this respect perhaps the finest, but it belongs in spirit. Earlier in the book, it interrupts the steady descent from 18 to 22, in which Zarathustra, as the consequence of a second nightmare which robs him of all self-confidence and almost of self-control, again deserts his disciples, this time, however, in a mood of profound misery, and this time for good. Part 3. For the most part, Zarathustra is alone and addressing himself. Earlier themes are taken up and woven into the texture, which sometimes grows too tight. Imagery becomes plotted at times, but the intensity of expression aimed at it is superbly achieved and maintained. 1. Zarathustra has just left his disciples and is making his way home, his depression still upon him. 2. On board ship, he expounds the eternal recurrence as a riddle and in language which recalls the nightmare of part 2, 18. Although all is still shrouded in obscurity and mystery, that he has now brought himself to raise the veil, even to this limited extent, is sufficient to restore him to the normal cheerfulness. 3 and 4. Prose poems, introspective, cheerful, calm, halfway between the melancholy of part 2, 9 to 11, and the Dionysian ecstasy of part 3, 4 to 16. 5. Back on firm land, Zarathustra experiences again his familiar nausea at mankind. 6. Self-portrait of Zarathustra as a solitary. 7. Extended exegesis of the text. May looking away be my only form of negation. 8. Polemic against piety. 9. Zarathustra arrives back at his cave, a hymn to solitude. 10. A modal evaluation of 3 vices. 11. Exhortation to cheerfulness. 12 to 16. The climax of the book, a supreme exhibition of the sustained intellectual passion which gives Nietzsche his place among the world's great men. 12 is a re-exposition of the brief of Zarathustra's teachings, up to, but not including, the theory of the eternal recurrence, which is reserved for. 13, in which the theory is at last stated in full and without disguise and joyfully accepted and embraced. With this act, Zarathustra's self-education reaches its appointed end. The fulfillment is celebrated with a trilogy of prose poems, 14 to 16, of great exuberance and intensity. At this culmination of his course, Zarathustra is, as aforesaid, entirely alone, so that when he wishes to give vent to his feelings of unbounded joy and gratitude in dithyrambic poetry, there is no one to whom he can address these dithyrambs except himself. Thus, 14 is addressed to his own soul, 15 to the life he feels within him, 16 to himself in his future reincarnation. The eternity referred to in 16 is, of course, the eternal recurrence, and the child he wants to have by eternity is himself. Part 4. When in January 1884 he closed his book with 7 seals, Nietzsche thought Zarathustra was finished. But in the following winter he took up the theme again and planned a further 3 parts. In the first of them, Zarathustra is visited by sundry higher men who, as a consequence of Zarathustra's instruction, became conscious of their inadequacy. At the conclusion of this part, Zarathustra receives the call to go out into the world again, and in the following part he accumulates a large following, to whom he preaches his now triumphant message. In the final part he dies. Although Nietzsche could not decide in what manner of these 3 new parts only the first was written, slowly and with interruptions in the winter of 1884-85, Nietzsche had it privately printed but withheld it from publication, and it first appeared as the 4th and last part of Zarathustra in 1892 as part of the first collection edition of Nietzsche. Stylistically, part 4 is quite different from the earlier parts and on a lower level of inspiration. The higher men are at once types and individuals. The gloomy prophet is Schopenhauer. The 2 kings are any kings. The conscientious man of the spirit is probably Darwin, although any scientific specialist would do. The sorcerer is Wagner. The sorcerer's poems are parodies of Wagner's later poetic manner, and the last pope is, of course, as yet imaginary. The ugliest man and the shadow are representations of the atheist and the freethinker, respectively. The voluntary beggar is either the Buddha or Tolstoy. The eternal recurrence remains in the background, but emerges at the conclusion where it receives its most sonorous and ecstatic affirmation. RJH, June 1969. All right. We got through it. We got there. We got there in the end. You know, the introduction will be finished in the end. All right. No. And on that note, we'll do a bit of part one. We'll go for a chunk. All right. Might be a bit more fun. When Zarathustra was 30 years old, he left his home and the lake of his home and went into the mountains. Here he had the enjoyment of his spirit and his solitude, and he did not weary of it for 10 years. But at last his heart turned, and one morning he rose with the dawn, stepped before the sun, and spoke to it thus: Great star, what would your happiness be if you had not those for whom you shine? You have come up here to my cave for 10 years. You would have grown weary of your light and of this journey without me, my eagle and my serpent. But we waited for you every morning, took from you your superfluity, and blessed you for it. Behold, I am weary of my wisdom. Like a bee that has gathered too much honey, I need hands outstretched to take it. I should like to give it away and distribute it until the wise among men have again become happy in their folly and the poor happy in their wealth. To that end, I must descend into the depths, as you do at evening when you go behind the sea and bring light to the underworld to superabundant star. Like you, I must go down as men to whom I want to descend call it. So bless me, then tranquil eye, that I can behold without envy even an excessive happiness. Bless the cup that wants to overflow, that the waters may flow golden from him and bear the reflection of your joy over all the world. Behold, this cup wants to be empty again, and Zarathustra wants to be man again. Thus began Zarathustra's down-going. Zarathustra went down the mountain alone, and no one met him. But when he entered the forest, an old man, who had left his holy hut to look for roots in the forest, suddenly stood before him. And the old man spoke thus to Zarathustra: This wanderer is no stranger to me. He passed by here many years ago. He was called Zarathustra, but he has changed. Then you carried your ashes to the mountains. Will you today carry your fire into the valleys? Do you not fear an incendiary punishment? Yes, I recognize Zarathustra. His eyes are clear, and no disgust lurks behind his mouth. Does he not go along like a dancer? How changed Zarathustra has become. A child, an awakened one. What do you want now with the sleepers? You lived in solitude as in the sea, and the sea bore you. Alas, do you want to go ashore? Alas, do you want again drag your body yourself? Zarathustra answered, I love mankind. Why, said the saint, did I go into the forest and the desert? What, was it not because I loved mankind all too much? Now I love God. Mankind I do not love. Man is too imperfect a thing for me. Love of mankind would destroy me. Zarathustra answered, What did I say of love? I am bringing mankind a gift. Give them nothing, said the saint. Rather take something of them and bear it with them. That will please them best, if only it be pleasing to you. And if you want to give them, give no more than alms, and let them beg for that. No, answered Zarathustra, I give no alms. I am not poor enough for that. The saint laughed at Zarathustra and spoke thus: See to it that they accept your treasures. They are mistrustful of hermits and do not believe that we come to give. Our steps ring too lonely through their streets, and when at night they hear in the beds a man going by long before the sun is risen, they probably ask themselves, Where is that thief going? Do not go to men, but stay in the forest. Go rather to the animals. Why will you not be as I am, a bear among bears, a bird among birds? And what does the saint do in the forest? Asked Zarathustra. The saint answered, I make songs and sing them, and when I make songs I laugh, weep, and mutter. Thus I praise God. With singing, weeping, laughing, and muttering, I praise the God who is my God. But what do you bring us as a gift? When Zarathustra heard these words, he saluted the saint and said, What should I have to give you? What should I have to give you? but let me go quickly, that I may take nothing from you. And thus they parted from one another. And the old man and Zarathustra, laughing as two boys laugh. But when Zarathustra was alone, he spoke thus to his heart: Could it be possible this old saint has not yet heard, in his forest, that God is dead? When Zarathustra arrived at the nearest of the towns lying against the forest, he found in that very place many people assembled in the market square, for it had been announced that the tightrope walker would be appearing, and Zarathustra spoke thus to the people: I teach you of the Superman. Man is something that should be overcome. What have you done to overcome him? All creatures hitherto have created something beyond themselves, and do you want to be the ebb of this great tide and return to the animals rather than overcome man? What is the apes of men? A laughing stock, or a painful embarrassment, and just so shall be to the Superman, a laughing stock or a painful embarrassment. You have made your way from worm to man, and much in you is still worm. Once you were apes, and even now man is more of an ape than any ape. But he who is the wisest among you, he also is only a discord and hybrid of plant and of ghost. But do I bid you become ghosts or plants? Behold, I teach you the Superman. The Superman is the meaning of the earth. Let your will say, the Superman shall be the meaning of the earth. I entreat you, my brothers, remain true to the earth, and do not believe those who speak to you of superterrestrial hopes. They are poisoners, whether they know it or not. They are despisers of life, atrophying and self-poisoned men, of whom the earth is weary, so let them be gone. Once blasphemy against God was the greatest blasphemy, but God died, and thereupon these blasphemers died too. To blaspheme the earth is now the most dreadful offence, and to esteem the bowels of the inscrutable more highly than the meaning of the earth. Once the soul looked contemptuously upon the body, and then this contempt was the supreme good. The soul wanted the body lean, monstrous, famished. So the soul thought to escape the body and from the earth. Oh, this soul was itself lean, monstrous, and famished, and cruelty was the delight of the soul. But tell me, my brothers, what does your body say about your soul? Is your soul not poverty and dirt and miserable ease? In truth, man is a polluted river. One must be a sea to receive a polluted river, and not be defiled. Behold, I teach you the Superman. He is this sea. In him, your great contempt can go under. What is the greatest thing you can experience? It is the hour of the great contempt, the hour in which even your happiness grows loathsome to you, and your reason and your virtue also. The hour when you say, what good is my happiness? It is the poverty and dirt and miserable ease, but my happiness should justify its existence itself. The hour when you say, what good is my reason? Does it long for knowledge as the lion for its food? It is poverty and dirt and miserable ease. The hour when you say, what good is my virtue? It has not yet driven me mad. How tired am I of my good and my evil? It is all poverty and dirt and miserable ease. The hour when you say, what good is my justice? I do not see that I am fire and hot coals, but the just man is fire and hot coals. The hour when you say, what good is my pity? It is not pity the cross upon which he who loves man is nailed, but my pity is no crucifixion. Have you ever spoken thus? Have you ever cried thus? Ah, that I heard you crying thus. It is not your sin, but your moderation that cries to heaven. Your very meanness in sinning cries to heaven. Where is the lightning to lick you with? Where is the lightning to lick you with its tongue? Where is the madness with which you should be cleansed? Behold, I teach you the Superman. He is this lightning. He is this madness. When Zarathustra had spoken thus, one of the people cried, now we have heard enough of the tightrope walker. Let us see him too. And all the people laughed at Zarathustra. But the tightrope walker, who thought that the words applied to him, set to work. But Zarathustra looked at the people and marveled. Then he spoke thus: Man is a rope, fastened between animal and Superman, a rope over an abyss, a dangerous going across, a dangerous wayfaring, a dangerous looking back, a dangerous shuddering and staying still. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal. What can be loved in man is that he is going across and a down going. I love those who do not know how to live except their lives be a down going, for they are those who are going across. I love the great despisers, for they are the great venerators and arrows of longing for the other bank. I love those who do not first seek beyond the stars for reasons to go down and to be sacrifices, but who sacrifice themselves to the earth, and the earth may one day belong to the Superman. I love him who lives for knowledge and who wants knowledge, and one day the Superman may live, and thus he wills his own downfall. I love him who works and invents that he may build a house for the Superman and prepare earth, animals, and plants for him, for thus he wills his own downfall. I love him who loves his virtue, for virtue is will to downfall and an arrow of longing. I love him who keeps back no drop of spirit for himself, but wants to be the spirit of his virtue entirely. Thus he steps as spirit over the bridge. I love him who makes a predilection and fate of his virtue. Thus for his virtue's sake he will live or not live. I love him who does not want too many virtues. One virtue is more virtue than two, because it is more of a knot for fate to cling to. I love him whose soul is lavish, who neither wants nor returns thanks, for he always gives and will not preserve himself. I love him who is ashamed when the dice fall in his favor, and who then asks, am I a cheat? For he wants to perish. I love him who throws golden words in advance of his deeds, and always performs more than he promised, for he wills his own downfall. I love him who justifies the men of the future and redeems the men of the past, for he wants to perish by the men of the present. I love him who chastises his God, because he loves his God, for he must perish by the anger of his God. I love him whose soul is deep, even in its ability to be wounded, and whom even a little thing can destroy. Thus he is glad to go over the bridge. I love him whose soul is overfull, so that he forgets himself, and all things are in him. Thus all things become his downfall. I love him who is of free spirit and a free heart. Thus his head is only the bowels of his heart, and his heart drives him to his downfall. I love all those who are like heavy drops falling singly from the dark cloud that hangs over mankind. They prophesy the coming of the lightning, and the prophets they perish. Behold, I am a prophet of the lightning, and a heavy drop from the cloud. But this lightning is called Superman. 5. When Zarathustra had spoken these words, he looked again at the people and fell silent. There they stand, he said to his heart. There they laugh. They do not understand me. I am not the mouth for these ears. Must one first shatter their ears to teach them to hear with their eyes? Must one rumble like drums and Must one rumble like drums and Lenten preachers? Or do they believe only those who stammer? They have something of which they are proud. What is it called that makes them proud? They call it culture. It distinguishes them from the goat herds. Therefore they dislike hearing the word contempt spoken of them, so I shall speak to their pride. So I shall speak to them of the most contemptible man, and that is the ultimate man. And thus spoke Zarathustra to the people. It is time for man to fix his goal. It is time for man to plant the seed of his highest hope. His soil is still rich enough for it, but the soil will one day be poor and weak. No longer will a tree be able to grow from it. Alas, the time is coming when man will no more shoot the arrow of his longing out over mankind, and the string of his bow will have forgotten how to twang. I tell you, one must have chaos in one to give birth to a dancing star. I tell you, you still have chaos in you. Alas, the time is coming when man will give birth to no more stars. Alas, the time of the most contemptible man is coming, the man who can no longer despise himself. Behold, I shall show you the ultimate man. What is love? What is creation? What is longing? What is a star? Thus asks the ultimate man and blinks. The earth has become small, and upon it hops the ultimate man, who makes everything small. His race is inexterminable as the flea. The ultimate man lives longest. We have discovered happiness, say the ultimate men, and blink. They have left the places where living was hard, for one needs warmth. One still loves one's neighbor and rubs oneself against him, for one needs warmth. Sickness and mistrust count as sins with them. One should go about warily, for warily he is a fool who still stumbles over stones or over men. A little poison now and then that produces pleasant dreams, and a lot of poison at last for a pleasant death. They still work, for work is entertainment, but they take care the entertainment does not exhaust them. Nobody grows rich or poor anymore. Both are too much of a burden. Who still wants to rule? Who obey? Both are too much of a burden. No herdsman and one herd. No herdsman and one herd. Everyone wants the same thing. Everyone is the same. Whoever thinks otherwise goes voluntarily into the madhouse. Formerly all the world was mad, say the most acute of them, and blink. They are clever and know everything that has ever happened, so there is no end to their mockery. They still quarrel, but they soon make up. Otherwise, indigestion would result. They have their little pleasure for the day and their little pleasure for the night, but they respect health. We have discovered happiness, say the ultimate men, and blink. And here ended Zarathustra's first discourse, which is also called the prologue, for at this point the shouting and mirth of the crowd interrupted him. Give us this ultimate man, O Zarathustra, so they cried. Make us into this ultimate man. You can have your Superman. And all the people laughed and shouted, but Zarathustra grew sad and said into his heart, They do not understand me. I am the mouth for these ears. Perhaps I lived too long in the mountains, listened too much to the trees and the streams. Now I speak to them as to goatherds. Unmoved is my soul and bright as the mountains in the morning, but they think me cold and mocker with fearful jokes. And now they look at me and laugh, and laughing they still hate me. There is ice in their laughter. But then something happened that silenced every mouth and fixed every eye. In the meantime, of course, the tightrope walker had begun his work. He had emerged from a little door and was proceeding across the rope, which was stretched between two towers and thus hung over the people and the market square. Just as he had reached the middle of the course, the little door opened again and a brightly dressed fellow like a buffoon sprang out and followed the former with rapid steps. Forward, lamefoot, cried this fearsome voice. Forward, sluggard, intruder, pallid face, lest I tickle you with my heels. What are you doing here between towers? You belong in the tower. You should be locked up. You are blocking the way of a better man than you. And with each word he came nearer and nearer to him. But when he was only a single pace behind him, there occurred the dreadful thing that silenced every mouth and fixed every eye. He emitted a cry like a devil and sprang over the man standing in his path. But the latter, when he saw his rival thus triumph, lost his head and the rope. He threw away his pole and fell faster even than it, like a vortex of legs and arms. The market square and the people were like a sea in a storm. They flew apart in disorder, especially where the body would come crashing down. But Zarathustra remained still, and the body fell quite close to him, badly injured and broken, but not yet dead. After a while, consciousness returned to the shattered man, and he saw Zarathustra kneeling beside him. What are you doing? He asked at length. I've known for a long time that the devil would trip me up. Now he's dragging me to hell. Are you trying to prevent him? On my honor, friend, answered Zarathustra. All you have spoken of does not exist. There is no devil and no hell. Your soul will be dead even before your body. Therefore, fear nothing any more. The man looked up mistrustfully. If you are speaking the truth, he said then, I leave nothing when I leave life. I am not much more than an animal which has been taught to dance by blows and starvation. Not so, said Zarathustra. You have made danger your calling. There is nothing in you nothing in that to despise. Now you perish. Through your calling, so I will bury you with my own hands. When Zarathustra had said this, the dying man replied no more, but he motioned with his hand as if he sought Zarathustra's hand to thank him. In the meanwhile, evening had come, and the market square was hidden in darkness, and the people dispersed, for even curiosity and terror grow tired. But Zarathustra sat on the ground beside the dead man and was sunk in thought. Thus he forgot the time. But at length it became night, and a cold wind blew over the solitary figure. Then Zarathustra arose and said to his heart, Truly Zarathustra has a handsome catch today. He caught no man, but he did catch a corpse. Uncanny is human existence, and still without meaning, a buffoon can be fatal to it. I want to teach men the meaning of their existence, which is the Superman, the lightning from the dark cloud man. But I am still distant from them, and my meaning does not speak to their minds. To men, I am still a cross between a fool and a corpse. Dark is the night, dark are Zarathustra's ways. Come, cold and stiff companion, I am going to carry you to the place where I shall bury you with my own hands. When Zarathustra had said this to his heart, he loaded the corpse onto his back and set forth. He had not gone 100 paces when a man crept up to him and whispered in his ear, and behold, it was the buffoon of the tower who spoke to him. Go away from this town, O Zarathustra, he said. Too many here hate you. The good and the just hate you and call you their enemy and despiser. the faithful of the true faith hate you, and they call you a danger to the people. It was lucky for you that they laughed at you, and surely you spoke like a buffoon. It was lucky for you that you made company with a dead dog. So by so basing yourself, you have saved yourself for today. But leave this town, or tomorrow I shall jump over you, a living man, over a dead one. And when he had said this, the men disappeared. Zarathustra, however, went on through the dark streets. At the town gate, the grave diggers accosted him. They shone their torch in his face, recognized Zarathustra, and greatly derided him. Zarathustra is carrying the dead dog away. Excellent Zarathustra has become a grave digger, for our hands are too clean for this roast. Does Zarathustra want to rob the devil of his morsel? Good luck then, a hearty appetite. But if the devil is a better thief than Zarathustra, he will steal them both. He will eat them both. And they laughed and put their heads together. Zarathustra said nothing and went his way. When he had walked for 2 hours past woods and swamps, he had heard too much hungry howling of wolves, and he grew hungry himself. So he stopped at a lonely house in which a light was burning. Hunger has waylaid me, said Zarathustra. Like a robber, my hunger has waylaid me in woods and swamps, and in the depth of night. My hunger is astonishing moods. Often it comes to me only after meal times, and today it did not come at all. Where has it been? And with that, Zarathustra knocked on the door of the house of an old man, and an old man appeared. He carried a light and asked, Who comes here to me, to my uneasy sleep? A living man and a dead, said Zarathustra. Give me food and drink. I forgot about them during the day. He who feeds the hungry refreshes his own soul. Thus speaks wisdom. The old man went away, but returned at once and offered Zarathustra bread and wine. This is a bad country for hungry people, he said. That is why I live here. Animals and men come here to me, the hermit, but bid your companion eat and drink. He is wearier than you. Zarathustra answered, My companion is dead. I shall hardly be able to persuade him. That is nothing to do with me, said the old man morosely. Whoever knocks at my door must take what I offer him. Eat and fare you well. After that, Zarathustra walked 2 hours more and trusted to the road and to the light of the stars. For he was used to walking abroad at night and liked to look into the face of all that slept. But when morning dawned, Zarathustra found himself in a thick forest and a road disappeared. Then he laid the dead man in a hollow tree at his head, for he wanted to protect him from the wolves, and laid himself down on the mossy ground, and straightway he fell asleep, weary in body but with a soul at rest. Zarathustra, 9. We're up to 9, okay? Zarathustra slept long, and not only the dawn but the morning too passed over his head. But at length he opened his eyes. In surprise, Zarathustra gazed into the forest and the stillness. In surprise that he gazed into himself. Then he arose quickly, like a seafarer who suddenly sees land, and rejoiced, for he beheld the new truth. And then he spoke to his heart thus, A light has dawned for me. I need companions, living ones, not dead companions and corpses which I carry with me wherever I wish, but I need living companions who follow me because they want to follow themselves and who want to go where I want to go. A light has dawned for me. Zarathustra shall not speak to the people, but to companions. Zarathustra shall not be herdsman, but dog to the herd, to lure many away from the herd. That is why I have come. The people and the herd shall be angry with me. The herdsman shall call Zarathustra a robber. I say herdsmen, but they call themselves the good and the just. I say herdsmen, but they call themselves the faithful or the true faith. Behold, the good and the just, whom do they hate most? Him who smashes their tables of values, the breaker, the lawbreaker. But he is the creator. Behold, the faithful of all faiths, whom do they hate the most? Him who smashes their tables of values, the breaker, the lawbreaker. But he is the creator. The creator seeks companions, not corpses or herds or believers. The creator seeks fellow creators, those who inscribe new values on new tables. The creator seeks companions and fellow harvesters, for with him everything is ripened for harvesting. For he lacks his 100 sickles, so he tears off the ears of corn and is vexed. The creator seeks companions, and such as know how to whet their sickles. They will be called destroyers and despisers of good and evil, but they are harvesters and rejoicers. Zarathustra seeks fellow creators, fellow harvesters, and fellow rejoicers, for what he has to do with herds and herdsmen and corpses. And you, for what has he to do with herds and herdsmen and corpses? And you, my first companion, Fare you well, I have buried you well in your hollow tree, I have hidden you well from the wolves, but I am leaving you. The time has come. Between dawn, a new truth has come to me. I will not be herdsman or gravedigger. I will not speak again to the people. I have spoken to a dead man for the last time. I will make company with creators, with harvesters, with rejoicers. I will show them the rainbow and the stairway to the Superman. I shall sing my song to the lone hermit and to the hermits in pairs, and I will make my heart of him who still has ears for unheard of things heavy with my happiness. I make for my goal, I go my way, I shall leap over the hesitating and the indolent. Thus may my going forward be their going down. 10. Zarathustra said this to his heart as the sun stood at noon. Then he looked inquiringly into the sky, for he heard above him the sharp cry of a bird, and behold, an eagle was sweeping through the air in wide circles, and from it was hanging a serpent, not like prey, but like a friend, for it was coiled around the eagle's neck. It is my animals, said Zarathustra, and rejoiced in his heart. The proudest animal under the sun, and the wisest animal under the sun, they have come scouting. They wanted to learn if Zarathustra was still alive. Am I in fact alive? I found it most dangerous among men and then among animals. I found it more dangerous among men than among animals. Zarathustra is following dangerous paths. May my animals lead me. Then, when Zarathustra had said this, he recalled the words of the saint in the forest, sighed, and spoke thus to his heart. I wish I were wise. I wish I were wise from the heart of me, like my serpent. But I am asking the impossible. Therefore I ask my pride always to go along with my wisdom. And if one day my wisdom should desert me, it loves to fly away. Then may my pride too fly with my folly. Folly. Thus began Zarathustra's down going. All right, that'll do. That's pretty good. All right, I'll do more tomorrow. My voice is getting a bit rough. Thanks. Rock on,